I start with this image and an anecdote from my childhood when my parents enrolled me in the Colegio San Antonio in Guayama, Puerto Rico, where we have moved. This was the mid 60s when several American companies operated petroleum refineries in the area. And as a result, there were many Americanos in my school. I vividly remember how these blonde, freckled, blue-eyed kids uh, would run to me speaking what sounded to me like gibberish. It was English, thinking that I too was a gringa. But what also remains in my memory is feeling confused, even baffled by that assumption, since I thought of myself as nothing more, nothing else than a Puerto Rican. Then I arrived in Chicago in 1980 to study at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Because of my complexion and short hair, petite size, and accented English, to SAIC peers, that meant I was French. Out in the city, I was often confused with being Polish, and when I visited a Latino neighborhood, people acted surprised when I addressed them in perfect Spanish. So in the barrio, I felt I was treated with suspicion because I was too white to belong. For that reason, I felt like I had to prove my Latinidad all the time. These confusions and questions about identity have informed the issues I work with as an artist today. I long have been using my art to investigate the convergence between race, politics, and culture as it applies to Puerto Ricans, but also to Latinos in the US. So I long have been using my art to investigate the convergence between race, politics, and culture as it applies to Puerto Ricans and other Latinx in the United States. Those concerns are clearly stated in a self-portrait diptych that I did in the early 90s titled ¿Y tu abuela aonde está? What color is your grandmother? And La Blanquita, the white one. The self-portraits were inspired by a poem, a 1942 poem by Puerto Rican poet Fortunato Vizcarrondo, who used the cacophony of the way Afro-Puerto Ricans spoke during the Commonwealth era. Much like the poem, the drawings are meant to address Puerto Ricans on racial biases and my own discomfort with politically and socially constructed ethnic and racial labels. ¿Y tu abuela aonde está? Is the title of the Vizcarrondo poem. He uses the family abuela or abuela or grandmother as a metaphor for being ashamed of one's own skin color and race. Two of the most poignant verses go like this, and I will translate. Ayer me dijiste negro. Yesterday you called me negro. Y hoy te voy a contestar. Today I will reply. Mi mãe se siente en la sala. My mom sits in the living room. ¿Y tu abuela a dónde está? And your grandmother, where is she? Ayer me dijiste negro. Yesterday you called me negro. Queriéndome bochornar. Wanting to embarrass me. Mi abuela sale a la sala. My grandmother comes out to the living room. Y la tuya oculta está. Yours is hidden away. The implication here is that the racist antagonist is hiding their African ancestry. In my ¿Y tu abuela a dónde está? I drew myself as I were a person of mixed race and play with the ambiguity of my appearance. But then in La Blanquita, the white one, I drew myself more or less as I looked at the time, but exaggerated my quote unquote whiteness. In a sense, asking the question, what color is white? So by making these drawings, I began to resolve my dilemma. Why is it that I cannot belong? Why was it that I was not being recognized as being Puerto Rican or Latinx? Most of my work from 1981 to 1993 was done in drawing because I needed the clarity of a process that I felt was direct and to the point. The drawing process had an almost archaeological function in my work. It helped me excavate and reveal the many layers of my identity, or so I felt. Both of these pieces are from a series I did in 1991 titled In Search of an Island, which was inspired by a discussion that year between the Puerto Rican government and the US Congress over obtaining permission to conduct a plebiscite or referendum to determine a permanent status for the island. I should explain here, though, that when I use the term political in reference to my work, the personal is conflated with that term. As Juan Sanchez described in the essay for the exhibition catalog, this body of work is also about a, quote, plebiscite of the mind, unquote. In other words, about the individual and collective image that we Puerto Ricans have of ourselves. The drawings described, I felt, a metaphorical sense of place where I thought I existed then, not in Puerto Rico, not in Chicago, my own island, a location within myself, charged with the memories of the other, but enriched by the experience of being distanced from it. The pico a pico, beak to beak, face to face was the next body of work, shown in 1993, still a legal sport in Puerto Rico and therefore one that had resisted assimilation of US culture. Cockfighting is the metaphor I use in this series to speak about my resistance to assimilation. In the pico a pico, the skeleton of the rooster at your left is a symbolic metaphor of the core of the culture, the foundation of the Puerto Rican culture in me. On the right of that image is a gallo, or fighting cock, groomed, conditioned, and trained to fight, as a symbolic metaphor of the assimilated self. So in this image, the core confronts the assimilated self and vice versa. The fighting cock is the fighting cock's opponent is himself, just like me, engaged in an unceasing struggle to maintain and evolve my cultural identity. Una cuestión de honor, a matter of honor, was the conclusion of the series. It is titled A Matter of Honor because that is how the galleros refer to the contest. It is an image where, like the discussion on cultural identity, the fighting cock occupies a limitless and timeless space, a kind of cultural limbo with alternating states of victory and defeat. My cultural and racial identity, I realize, will ever remain a matter of honor. A matter of honor for me to resolve. In this series, I discover in game-like aesthetics an effective way to disarm viewers of their apprehension when confronting artworks that have political content like mine. So Domino is an installation that resembles a domino game in process. The title of the installation is not only a reference to the domino game, but it's also a play with the past term of the verb dominar, or to dominate, since the works were made and exhibited to mark the centennial of the U.S. invasion and takeover of Puerto Rico, which happens on July 25th, 1898, after the Hispanic-American War. It also commemorated the 20th anniversary of my arrival to the U.S. So from this point on, so from 1998 on, I have lived longer in the mainland U.S. than when I lived in the island. Also, like cockfighting, the game of domino is a favorite pastime in Puerto Rico. How the many afternoons I spent playing dominoes with my siblings. So it came to mind as an interesting structure that would allow me to quote unquote play out my analysis and redrawing of the fine line between acculturation and assimilation. I was asking myself, have I become an assimilar or assimilated? Or have I just simply acculturated? After Domino, I committed to stay in the mainland and became interested in moving away from the specific reference to Puerto Rico and extended my investigation then to the experience of all Latinx in the United States. I guess I felt like I was one of them then. That led to Memoria Memory, an installation that borrows the format of the memory game. You know, that game that most of us played when we were young, or that you had played with your children, that involves remembering the location of matching pairs of cards. The prediction in 2000 that Latinx will become the largest group within the minority populations of the United States, something that became a reality in 2010, was the spark that moved me to work on this piece. The realization by mainstream politicians, scholars, and the press that the well-established political black and white American racial binary was suddenly broken, I thought created an opportunity to trace and comment on Latinx contributions to the historical and cultural heritage of the United States. But most importantly, this momentum, I believe, also provided an opportunity for us to look back and remember where we have been. Where we have been in order to understand where we are now. And trace a path towards an increasing productive future in this country. Since it was first shown in Chicago in 2011-2012, Memoria Memory had traveled twice. First to Pittsburgh, and most recently to Puerto Rico, where it sparked conversations about current events. And sadly, 9 years later, as we know, we're still wrestling with the same concerns. The marketing of Latino culture was an important sub-theme in Memoria, Memory. The piece that you see at your left is from that project. So the most current work is a series of paintings I have titled De Lata, or To Give Us Away. I'm here again playing with words since the title alludes to not only lata, the word in Spanish for can, but also with the verb delatar, which means to tell, to give away. I contend that all images carry messages, messages that often pass beneath our notice precisely because they hide on cans of mango juice, tomato sauce, or frijoles. As actual acts of decontextualization, this label designs turned us into stereotypical characters. For me, the labels could function instead as a liminal space where Latinas have empowering, hybridized culture experiences. So the Lata paintings embrace that liminality as an alternative towards more ethical, pluralistic, and multi-generational portrayals of Latinx women. In other words, we are more than just a label. I've drawn, photographed, and interviewed Latinx women whose backgrounds intersect with and depart from my own. Together, we have built community through our fondness for cooking and our knowledge of the cultural significance of food. This is a group of women of different nationalities, ethnicities, class, age, and occupations. The idea is to give away a sampling of characteristics and contributions that are often missed. I find that the mainstream feminist movement has failed women of color, and there are not enough of us helping each other. With this work, I hope to encourage us to change that. In closing, I will share that my art is a laboratory where my personal experiences get tested against the societal and political conditions in which I live. There are, however, no formulas in this lab, nor are there prescriptions or solutions to problems. I maintain an integrated practice that includes family obligation, teaching and mentoring students and faculty, as well as lending my expertise to schools and art organizations. So with all that, my intention is to educate and influence viewers to think about the multiple layer and complex issues that are part of addressing the challenges we face, given our understandings and misunderstandings of gender, race, ethnicity, and nationhood. Thank you.